My parents secretly planned to sell our house and ship me to boarding school, then called me selfish for finding out. When I confronted them, my mom cried and said, "You were the reason we divorced." I just stared at her. That was 3 months ago. Yesterday, she came over with ice cream and couldn't look me in the eye. My parents divorced because of my mom's affair, although I never fully believed that. They always seemed way too in love to cheat on each other. Even after they split 3 years ago, my mom still came around pretty often to drop stuff off or have coffee with my dad. They joked around and acted friendly enough to confuse anyone who saw them together. To me, it felt like they still had unfinished business. A few weeks ago, my dad asked me to check something on his laptop while he was fixing dinner. He left his phone synced to his computer, so texts popped up on his screen constantly. Usually I ignored them, but one caught my eye from my mom. "Can't wait to see you soon. It'll be just like old times." My heart leapt into my throat. That message was more than friendly. It sounded exactly like the way they used to talk before everything went wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I got obsessed with the idea that maybe they secretly missed each other. Maybe they were finally realizing they made a huge mistake. I was 16, and I'd missed having a real family more than anything. I decided I was going to help them get back together, whether they realized it or not. Their first date had been right here in this house. Spaghetti dinner, candlelight, Sinatra records spinning on the old stereo. I figured I could recreate it perfectly. My dad lived in our original family home, and my mom still had keys. I told her I needed help with a school project and begged my dad to keep the evening free because I wanted a father-son dinner. Neither of them suspected anything. In the days leading up to it, I got more confident. I felt sure they'd fall right back into old habits once they saw what I'd done. But while cleaning out the dining room to set things up, I found something weird tucked away behind the photo albums on the bookshelf. It was a stack of papers from a real estate company, offers, emails, agreements about selling our house. My stomach sank instantly. My dad had never mentioned moving. I felt panicked and confused. I searched more thoroughly when he wasn't home and found even worse things. There were applications for boarding schools hidden in his desk drawer. One in Massachusetts near my mom, another in Florida, where it seemed like my dad planned to move. They'd written notes to each other about how to break it to him gently, and once everything was set, I realized with a sickening feeling they'd been secretly planning this for months. I couldn't believe it. I dug deeper into my dad's computer. There I found emails about new relationships both of my parents had, serious ones, people I'd never even heard of. They planned to each buy apartments and move in with their new partners right after selling our home and shipping me off to school. My chest ached with betrayal and embarrassment at my stupid dinner plan. I wanted to cancel everything at first, but instead decided they deserved to know I'd found out. I printed every email, every application, and every text. When they both arrived, they looked stunned to see the candles and hear Sinatra playing softly. My mom smiled nervously. My dad frowned. "What's this?" he asked suspiciously. "Oh, it's nothing," I replied, telling them to sit down. And right as they did, I sat with them too, and wasting no time, I pushed the stack of papers towards them. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to keep them under the table. Neither of them said anything at first, but my mom looked sick, and my dad's jaw tightened. Quietly, I said, "I know what you've been planning behind my back." They tried to stay calm at first, saying this was all for my benefit, and that I'd understand when I was older. That's when I dropped my final card. I already called Grandma. She still owns part of this house and said she'll never let you sell it. That was a bluff, but I had to play it. The room went completely silent, and then my dad exploded. He shouted at me, calling me selfish and manipulative. My mom jumped in, tears in her eyes, saying that I was the reason they'd divorced, that having me had ruined their marriage. I stared at her, too shocked to speak, but then it got worse. They kept going, their words getting nastier. They said I was an accident, that neither of them ever wanted kids, and I destroyed their marriage from day one. I tried to argue back, but my voice broke, and the room spun around me. Their words cut deep, tearing apart everything I'd ever believed about my family. I couldn't take any more. My throat tightened. I stood up, knocking the chair over behind me, and ran upstairs. My dad yelled after me that Grandma wouldn't stop anything, that they'd make sure the house was sold no matter what. I slammed my bedroom door shut and collapsed on my bed, sobbing harder than I ever had before. I don't know how long I cried. It felt like hours. My pillow was soaked, and my eyes burned. I could hear them downstairs, still arguing. Their voices rose and fell like waves crashing against the shore. I pulled my headphones on and blasted music to drown them out, but it didn't help much. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock on my door. I ignored it. Another knock, then my mom's voice calling my name. I turned up my music louder. Eventually, I heard her footsteps walking away. Good. I didn't want to talk to either of them. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke up still in my clothes from the night before. My phone showed it was 10:30 a.m. Usually my dad would have knocked on my door by now, telling me not to waste the day, but the house was quiet, too quiet. I crept downstairs, half expecting to find them waiting to ambush me with more lectures, but the dining room was empty. The romantic setup from last night cleared away like it never happened. In the kitchen, I found a note on the fridge. "Gone to talk things through. Back later. There's leftover pizza if you get hungry. Dad." Great. They were probably finalizing their plans to ship me off. I grabbed the pizza box from the fridge and took it back upstairs. No way was I hanging around waiting for them to come back and tell me which prison school I'd be attending. While eating cold pizza in my room, I realized I needed a real plan. The bluff about Grandma clearly hadn't worked. I needed actual leverage, something that would force them to listen to me. I opened my laptop and started researching. Could a minor legally prevent their parents from selling a house? Could I refuse to go to boarding school? What rights did I actually have? The answers weren't encouraging. Basically, until I turned 18, my parents could make most decisions for me. But I did find some interesting stuff about property rights. If my grandma really did co-own the house with my dad, she could potentially block a sale. I wasn't sure if that was true, but it was worth looking into. I called my grandma, my dad's mom, who lived about an hour away. We were pretty close, but I hadn't seen her much since the divorce. She sounded surprised to hear from me. I told her I was working on a school project about family history, and asked if she knew anything about who legally owned our house. She seemed confused by the question, but told me my grandfather had originally bought the house, and when he died, he left it jointly to my dad and her. She still owned half the property, but let my dad live there and make decisions about it. My heart raced. My bluff had accidentally been true. Grandma really could stop the sale. I thanked her for the information and promised to visit soon, trying to sound casual even though my mind was spinning with possibilities. After hanging up, I did more research. If Grandma co-owned the house, my dad couldn't sell it without her signature. This was actual leverage, real power. For the first time since finding those papers, I felt a glimmer of hope. I heard the front door open around 2 p.m. My parents' voices drifted up the stairs, sounding tense but quieter than last night. I stayed in my room, planning my next move. Should I confront them again? Call Grandma back and tell her the truth? I wasn't sure. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. My dad asked if we could talk. I hesitated, then said fine. Both my parents came in and sat awkwardly on the edge of my bed. They looked tired, with dark circles under their eyes. My mom started with an apology. She said they never should have said those things last night, that they didn't mean it. I was not an accident. They had wanted me. The divorce wasn't my fault. They were just shocked and angry that I'd gone through their private things. I didn't say anything, just stared at them, waiting for the real reason they were here. My dad cleared his throat and explained that yes, they had been planning to sell the house. Yes, they were both seeing other people. And yes, they had looked into boarding schools. But it wasn't because they wanted to get rid of me. They thought a fresh start would be good for everyone. I finally spoke up, asking why they hadn't just told me. Why all the secrets? Why make these huge decisions about my life without even asking what I wanted? They exchanged a look I couldn't read. My mom said they were worried I'd react badly, that I'd always been so attached to the house and the idea of our family staying the same. Well, duh. Of course I was attached to my home, and the idea that my parents didn't hate each other. Who wouldn't be? I told them about my conversation with Grandma. The color drained from my dad's face. He asked what exactly I'd told her. I admitted I hadn't told her about the sale. Plans yet, but I would if they didn't call off this whole boarding school thing. My dad's expression hardened. He said I was being manipulative again, that this was exactly why they hadn't included me in the discussions, because I always tried to control everything instead of accepting change. That made me so mad I could barely see straight. I wasn't the one being manipulative. They were the ones sneaking around making plans to uproot my entire life. The argument escalated quickly. Soon, we were all yelling again. My mom tried to play peacemaker, but it didn't work. Eventually, my dad stormed out, saying he needed air. My mom lingered, looking torn, then followed him. I slammed my door again and kicked my trash can across the room. Papers and food wrappers scattered everywhere. Great. Now I had a mess to clean up on top of everything else. While picking up the trash, I found an old birthday card from Grandma. Inside was her phone number and a note saying to call anytime. I stared at it for a long moment, then made a decision. I called her again, and this time told her everything. About the house sale, the boarding schools, the new relationships, all of it. She was silent for so long I thought we'd lost connection. Then she said, very calmly, that she was coming over. Now Grandma arrived an hour later, just as my parents were getting back. I watched from my window as she marched up the driveway, her small frame somehow looking intimidating. My dad froze when he saw her car. I could practically see the oh crap expression on his face even from upstairs. I crept halfway down the stairs to listen. Grandma's voice was quiet, but intense. I couldn't catch everything, but I heard phrases like, family legacy, and your father would be ashamed, and that boy deserves better. My parents barely got a word in. After what felt like forever, Grandma called my name. I came down, trying not to look like I'd been eavesdropping. The 3 adults sat at the kitchen table, my parents looking like scolded children. Grandma announced that no one was selling the house, no one was sending me to boarding school, and if my parents wanted to move on with their lives, they needed to find a solution that didn't involve throwing away our family home or disrupting my education. My dad started to argue, but Grandma shut him down with one look. It was kind of awesome to see. My mom just looked defeated. Grandma suggested that I could live in the house with her. My parents could move on with their new partners, but I wouldn't have to leave my home or my school. They could visit whenever they wanted and still be part of my life. My parents exchanged uncertain glances. My dad asked if I'd put Grandma up to this. Before I could answer, Grandma said this was her idea, and she was not asking permission. She was telling them how it was going to be. For the first time in days, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Grandma was on my side. I wasn't going to lose my home. I wasn't going to be shipped off to some boarding school. I had an ally. But that night, after Grandma left, with a promise to return the next day with her suitcase, my dad came to my room. He sat on my desk chair, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He told me he'd called a family meeting for tomorrow evening. Grandma would be there, my mom would be there, and we were going to figure this out once and for all. No more secrets, no more manipulation from anyone. He emphasized the anyone part while looking directly at me. I nodded. not trusting myself to speak. As he got up to leave, he paused at the door and said something that kept me awake most of the night. You think you know what's best, but you have no idea what you're messing with. The next day was Saturday. I stayed in my room most of the morning, avoiding my dad. Around noon, my mom showed up with Grandma. I could hear them talking in hushed voices downstairs. I tried to focus on homework, but my mind kept wandering to what would happen at this family meeting. At 5 p.m., my dad called me down. They were all sitting in the living room, my dad in his armchair, my mom and Grandma on the couch. There was an empty chair obviously meant for me. It felt like an intervention or something. My dad started by saying he understood I was upset about the changes, but I needed to understand that adults sometimes had to make difficult decisions. The house was too big and expensive for just the two of us. The boarding schools had excellent academic programs that would give me advantages our local school couldn't. His new girlfriend Martha made him happy in ways he hadn't been in years. My mom's boyfriend Wesley was good for her too. My mom jumped in, saying they'd always put my needs first, but they deserved happiness too. They'd stayed in an unhappy marriage for years because they thought it was better for me. The affair story had been a convenient explanation rather than telling everyone they'd simply fallen out of love. I looked at Grandma, expecting her to back me up, but she was nodding along with what they were saying. Had they gotten to her somehow? Convinced her to take their side? Then Grandma spoke. She said she understood why I wanted to stay in the house. It represented stability and happier times, but she was too old to move in and take care of me. She had her own home, her friends, her routines. She couldn't uproot her life, even for me. I felt betrayed all over again. Everyone was abandoning me. Everyone was choosing their own happiness over mine. I couldn't hold back anymore. I told them they were all selfish, that they didn't care about what I wanted or needed, that they were throwing away our family like it meant nothing. My dad's face darkened. He said I was being childish and entitled, that I didn't understand adult relationships or responsibilities, that sometimes people grew apart, and it wasn't anyone's fault. I shot back that it seemed pretty convenient that they'd both grown apart right when these new people entered the picture. Were they sure there hadn't been real affairs? Maybe the original story wasn't so made up after all. My mom gasped. My dad stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. He pointed at me and said I'd gone too far, that I had no right to question their integrity or their decisions. The argument spiraled from there. Voices raised, accusations flew. At one point, my dad said, if I was going to act like this, maybe boarding school was the only option. My mom started crying. Grandma tried to calm everyone down, but it was too late. I stormed out of the house, ignoring their calls to come back. I just started walking with no destination in mind. It was getting dark, but I didn't care. I needed to get away from all of them. I ended up at the park a few blocks from our house. I sat on a swing, pushing myself back and forth with my feet, trying to sort through my thoughts. My phone kept buzzing with texts and calls, but I ignored them. After about an hour, a car pulled up. It was Mrs. Patterson, our next-door neighbor. She rolled down her window and called my name, saying my family was worried sick. I reluctantly got in her car, and she drove me home. When we pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see not just my parents' and Grandma's cars, but another one I didn't recognize. Mrs. Patterson walked me to the door, probably to make sure I actually went inside. In the living room, along with my parents and Grandma, was an older man I'd never seen before. He stood up when I entered, extending his hand and introducing himself as Richard Taylor, a family therapist. Apparently, while I was gone, they'd called him and asked him to come over for an emergency session. I wanted to walk right back out, but Grandma gently guided me to a seat. Dr. Taylor had a calm, neutral way of speaking that wasn't immediately annoying like I expected. He explained that my parents had given him a brief overview of the situation, but he wanted to hear my perspective too. For the next 2 hours, we talked. Really talked, with Dr. Taylor making sure everyone got a chance to speak without interruption. It was weird, but kind of helpful. I explained how betrayed I felt, how scared I was of losing my home and being sent away. My parents explained their reasoning more clearly than before, without the anger and defensiveness. Dr. Taylor pointed out that everyone was focusing on the house and the schools, but the real issue seemed to be fear of abandonment and change. He asked questions that made us all think differently about the situation. By the end of the session, we hadn't solved everything, but we had a plan. Dr. Taylor would continue working with us as a family. No major decisions would be made for at least 3 months. In the meantime, I would visit the boarding schools to see if I might actually like them. My parents would introduce me to their new partners gradually, no pressure, and we would all work on communicating better. As Dr. Taylor was leaving, he pulled me aside and told me something I'll never forget. He said it took courage to fight for what I believed in, but true strength was being open to solutions I hadn't considered yet. That night, I lay in bed feeling emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. For the first time since finding those papers, I allowed myself to consider that maybe, just maybe, change didn't have to be all bad. The next morning, I came downstairs to find my dad making pancakes, my favorite breakfast. He didn't say anything about last night, just asked if I wanted blueberries or chocolate chips. I said both, and he smiled. While we ate, he mentioned that his girlfriend Martha had a son about my age. If I wanted, we could all go to a baseball game sometime. No pressure, just to meet. I surprised myself by saying that might be okay. After breakfast, I called Grandma to apologize for putting her in the middle of everything. She told me not to worry, that families sometimes went through rough patches. Then she asked if I'd help her clean out her attic next weekend. She had some of my grandfather's old records that she thought I might like, including some original Sinatra albums. That afternoon, my mom came by. She asked if I wanted to go for a drive. We ended up at this little ice cream shop we used to visit when I was younger. Over hot fudge sundaes, she told me more about Wesley, her boyfriend. He was a baked school science teacher who loved Star Wars and bad puns. He sounded kind of cool, actually. She also admitted that she and Dad had handled everything terribly. They should have included me in the discussions from the beginning, instead of making plans behind my back. She promised that wouldn't happen again. When we got home, my dad was on the phone with a real estate agent. My heart sank until I realized he was canceling the listing for our house. He saw my expression and gave me a thumbs up. That evening, we had another family meeting, but this time without Dr. Taylor. My dad announced that he'd decided not to sell the house right away. Instead, he'd rent it out if he moved in with Martha. That way, I could still come back to visit, and the house would stay in the family. My mom suggested that maybe I could split time between her place and Dad's, at least until I finished baked school. No boarding school unless I decided I wanted to go. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the happy family reunion I'd originally hoped for, but it was something we could all live with, a compromise that considered everyone's needs, including mine. As we wrapped up the meeting, my dad asked if I still had those Sinatra records I'd pulled out for my parent trap dinner. When I nodded, he suggested we play one. Soon, Frank's smooth voice filled the living room. My parents exchanged a look, and for a moment, I could see the echo of what they once had. Not romantic love anymore, but a shared history, shared memories, and me. I was part of that history, part of those memories. Maybe that was enough. I sat on my bed for what felt like hours, just staring at the wall. My eyes hurt from crying so much, and my throat felt raw. I kept replaying their words in my head. An accident, never wanted kids, ruined their marriage. How could they say those things to me? I always thought we were a normal, happy family until the divorce happened. Now it felt like my whole life had been a lie. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock on my door. I ignored it, pulling my blanket over my head. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Go away," I mumbled, not caring if they heard me or not. The door creaked open anyway. I expected to see my dad, but it was my mom standing there. Her eyes were red and puffy too. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I rolled over to face the wall. "I think you guys said enough already." She sighed and came in anyway, sitting on the edge of my bed. "We didn't mean those things. We were just shocked and angry." "You said I ruined your marriage," I replied, my voice cracking. "That's not something you just say when you're angry, unless you actually think it." "No, honey, that's not." She stopped and took a deep breath. "Your dad and we've been handling this all wrong. We should have talked to you about everything instead of making plans behind your back." I sat up and looked at her. "So you're still sending me away? Still selling the house?" She didn't answer right away, which told me everything I needed to know. I flopped back down on my pillow. "It's complicated," she finally said. "We need to figure out what's best for everyone." "Everyone except me, you mean?" My mom reached out to touch my shoulder, but I shrugged her off. After a few more failed attempts at conversation, she gave up and left. I heard her and my dad talking in low voices downstairs for a while before the front door closed. At least one of them had left. I barely slept that night. By morning, I had a plan. If they wouldn't listen to me, maybe they'd listen to Grandma for real this time. Not just my bluff, but the actual Grandma. My dad's mom had always been my biggest supporter. She'd lived in the same house her whole married life and was big on family traditions. No way would she be okay with them selling our home and shipping me off to boarding school. I waited until I heard my dad leave for his morning run before sneaking downstairs to use the landline. I didn't want him seeing me call her on my cell. Grandma picked up on the third ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey Grandma, it's me," I said, trying to sound normal despite the lump in my throat. "Well, this is a nice surprise. How are you, sweetheart?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. Everything came pouring out. The house sale, the boarding schools, their new relationships, the horrible things they'd said to me. By the end, I was crying again, and Grandma was making those soothing sounds she always made when I was upset as a kid. "I'll be there in an hour," she said firmly. "Don't you worry about a thing." True to her word, Grandma's ancient Buick pulled into our driveway exactly 58 minutes later. I watched from my bedroom window as she marched up to the front door, her small frame somehow looking 10 feet tall. She had that determined look she got when she was about to set someone straight. I ran downstairs and threw myself into her arms. She smelled like cinnamon and that rose perfume she'd worn since forever. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like maybe things could be okay. "Where's your father?" she asked, patting my back. "Running. He should be back soon." Grandma nodded and set her purse on the counter like she was settling in for battle. "Good. I'll make some coffee. Strong coffee." When my dad came back all sweaty from his run, he stopped dead in his tracks, seeing Grandma at the kitchen table. The color drained from his face. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Grandma took a slow sip of her coffee. "Sit down, Robert. We need to talk." My dad shot me a look that said he knew exactly who had called her. I stared right back, not backing down. For the next hour, Grandma laid into him. She reminded him that she still co-owned the house since Grandpa had left it to both of them. She told him in no uncertain terms that she would not sign off on any sale. She called my mom and told her to come over immediately. When Mom arrived looking confused, Grandma started in on her too. I'd never seen my parents so quiet. They sat there taking it as Grandma told them they were being selfish and short-sighted, that they were putting their own fresh starts ahead of my stability, that family homes weren't just buildings, they were anchors, especially for kids whose parents were splitting up. "But Mom," my dad finally said, "I can't afford to keep this place on my own if I'm also paying for a new apartment, and Janet wants to move in with Wesley." "Then figure something else out," Grandma snapped, "because this house stays in the family." My mom looked at me, then at Grandma. What if you moved in here, Francis? You've been saying that big house of yours is too much to manage alone. You could live here with him while she gestured vaguely, figure out our new situations. Grandma considered this, looking at me. Would that be all right with you, sweetheart? I nodded eagerly. Living with Grandma would be awesome. She made the best cookies and never complained when I played my music too loud. Plus, she'd be on my side if my parents tried anything else sneaky. My dad ran his hands through his hair, looking stressed. This isn't what we planned. Well, your plans were terrible, I said before I could stop myself. To my surprise, my dad didn't get mad. He actually laughed. A short, tired laugh. But still, yeah, I'm starting to see that. We spent the rest of the day hammering out details. Grandma would move in within the month. I'd stay in my room, and she'd take the guest room. My parents would both contribute to household expenses. I'd split holidays between my mom's new place with Wesley and my dad's new place with Martha, who I still hadn't met and wasn't sure I wanted to. It wasn't perfect, but it was way better than boarding school and losing our house. I felt like I could breathe again. That night, after my mom left and Grandma went to the guest room to sleep over, she didn't trust my dad not to pull something stupid if she left. My dad knocked on my bedroom door. "Got a minute?" he asked, hovering in the doorway. I shrugged, which he took as a yes. He sat on my desk chair, looking uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology," he said, staring at his hands. "What I said last night, about you being an accident and ruining our marriage, that was completely untrue and unforgivable." I didn't say anything. Part of me wanted to make him squirm. "The truth is," he continued, "your mom and I had problems long before you came along. We were too young when we got married, had different goals. We stayed together because we loved you and wanted you to have a stable home. So I was your excuse for not dealing with your problems," I said flatly. He winced. "That's not inaccurate, but it doesn't mean we didn't want you or love you. You were the best thing in our lives, still are." I wanted to stay mad, but it was hard when he looked so genuinely sorry. "Then why were you going to send me away?" "Because we're idiots who thought we were doing the right thing," he said simply. "The boarding schools have great academic programs. We thought you'd have more opportunities there. And honestly, we were worried about how you'd adjust to us dating new people. So your solution was to ship me off so you wouldn't have to deal with it?" Real mature dad. He actually cracked a smile at that. "When you put it that way, it does sound pretty stupid." We talked for a while longer. He told me more about Martha, who apparently taught music at the community college. They'd met at a coffee shop last year and had been dating secretly for months. He seemed happy when he talked about her, which was weird to see but also kind of nice. "Would you be willing to meet her sometime?" he asked cautiously. "No pressure, just a casual dinner or something." I thought about it. Maybe. Not right away though. He nodded, accepting that. Before he left, he paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for fighting for what you wanted, even if your methods were a bit unorthodox." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes, but not the ones I'd feared. Grandma moved in, bringing her collection of weird ceramic cats and her ancient record player. She took over the kitchen, filling the house with smells of home-cooked meals instead of my dad's sad frozen dinners. My mom came by often to help Grandma settle in. One day, she asked if I wanted to meet Wesley. I was reluctant at first, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a pizza place, neutral territory. Wesley turned out to be this tall, skinny guy with glasses and a Star Wars t-shirt. He was kind of a nerd, but in a cool way. He taught physics and coached the robotics team at his school. He didn't try too hard to impress me, which I appreciated. "Your mom talks about you all the time," he told me while my mom was in the bathroom. "She's really proud of you, you know." I just nodded, not sure what to say, but I didn't hate him, which was something. My dad's girlfriend Martha was a different story. When I finally agreed to meet her, she showed up with homemade cookies and a vintage record she thought I'd like. It felt like she was trying too hard, but she also brought her son Caleb, who was a year older than me, and into the same video games. While our parents awkwardly tried to make conversation, Caleb and I bonded over Fortnite strategies. "They're trying way too hard, right?" he whispered when our parents weren't listening. "So hard," I agreed, and we both laughed. Having Caleb there made the whole thing less weird. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged gamer tags and planned to play online together. One Saturday, about a month after Grandma moved in, I came downstairs to find my parents sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. My heart dropped. Were they back to their original plan despite everything? "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My dad looked up. "Hey, come join us. We're going through some old photo albums Grandma found in the attic." Relief washed over me as I sat down. The papers weren't real estate listings or boarding school applications. They were old photographs, yellowed with age. "Look at this one," my mom said, sliding a photo toward me. It showed my parents, much younger, standing in front of our house. My dad had his arm around my mom, and she was holding a sold sign and beaming. "That was the day we bought this place," my dad explained. "We were so excited, couldn't believe we could afford it. Your grandfather helped with the down payment," Grandma added, coming in with a tray of cookies. "He believed in investing in family homes." We spent the afternoon going through photos and telling stories. For the first time in forever, it felt like we were a family again. Different, changed, but still connected. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened. I still wasn't thrilled about my parents' new relationships, but I was starting to accept that life was moving forward whether I liked it or not. At least I still had my home, my school, my friends, and Grandma, who turned out to be the unexpected hero in all this. The next morning, I found my dad and grandma in the kitchen making pancakes together. They were arguing good-naturedly about how much cinnamon to add to the batter. "Morning, sleepyhead," grandma called when she saw me. Just in time to settle a debate. Does the perfect pancake need cinnamon or not? "Definitely yes," I said, taking my dad's side for once. He shot me a surprised smile, then slid a plate of pancakes my way. As we ate breakfast together, I realized something important. Home wasn't just about the house. It was about the people who made you feel like you belonged, even when everything else was changing. A few days later, my mom invited me to help her paint her new apartment. Wesley was there too, up on a ladder tackling the ceiling. I was skeptical at first, but it turned out to be kind of fun. We ordered pizza and got paint everywhere, including on each other. Wesley showed me how to use the roller to get an even coat, and my mom let me pick the color for the guest room, the room that would be mine when I stayed over. "What do you think?" she asked when we finished, surveying our handiwork. "It's not bad," I admitted, and it wasn't. Different, but not bad. The following weekend, my dad took me and Caleb fishing. It was awkward at first, but then Caleb dropped his phone in the lake trying to take a selfie, and we all laughed so hard we nearly tipped the boat. After that, things felt easier. Slowly, a new normal started to take shape. I lived with grandma in our family home. My parents came and went, living their separate lives but still connected through me. I got to know Wesley and Martha and Caleb. They weren't replacements for what I'd lost, but they were additions to what I still had. One night, about 6 months after our big blow-up, I came home from basketball practice to find my parents and grandma sitting in the living room with serious expressions. My stomach knotted instantly. "What's wrong?" I asked, dropping my gym bag. "Nothing's wrong," my dad assured me quickly. "We just wanted to talk to you about something." They explained that they'd been discussing my future, not boarding school. They'd completely dropped that idea, but college. It was still a couple of years away, but they wanted to start a savings plan. They'd each contribute, along with grandma. "We want you to have options," my mom explained, "to go wherever you want to go. And we promise to include you in all decisions going forward," my dad added. "No more secrets." I looked at them, these imperfect people who'd messed up, but were trying to do better. "Thanks," I said simply. Later that night, I found grandma in the kitchen making hot chocolate. She handed me a mug topped with mini marshmallows, just like she used to when I was little. "You know," she said, "your grandfather and I almost divorced once." I nearly choked on my hot chocolate. "What? When?" "Oh, about 30 years ago. We hit a rough patch, thought we wanted different things." She stirred her drink thoughtfully. "But we figured it out, found a way forward together." "So you think mom and dad should have stayed together?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, honey. Some people are better apart than together. What I think is that family finds a way to stay family, even when everything changes." I thought about that a lot over the next few weeks, about how my family had broken apart, but was slowly rebuilding itself in a new configuration. Different, but still mine. The next time we had a family dinner, with Wesley and Martha and Caleb all there, I looked around the table at these people who were trying so hard to make things work. It wasn't what I'd planned when I set up that candlelit dinner months ago. It wasn't the parent trap reunion I'd hoped for. It was messier and more complicated, but it was real, and maybe that was better.